The night the lights flickered was supposed to be just another quiet evening, the kind where nothing strange ever happens, and the world feels small, predictable, and safe. It was one of those nights where you expect everything to follow its usual routine, where the hum of the refrigerator blends with the distant passing of cars, and where the most unusual thing you might notice is the neighbor's cat crossing the yard. No one in the house was prepared for anything unusual, and honestly, no one had a single reason to be. But sometimes, the smallest and most ordinary moments can shift into something else entirely, something that you only realize later was the first warning sign. That was exactly how it happened the night the lights flickered, and something walked in. I remember the evening with strange clarity, like my mind pressed the moment into memory before I even understood something was wrong. It started with a soft tremble in the lights above us, just a little dimming that lasted less than a second. At first, none of us reacted. Why would we? Lights flicker all the time. Loose wiring, low voltage, maybe the grid was acting up again. Everyone in town joked about how the power lines were older than half the people living here. So when the glow dipped and came back, we didn't overthink it. We didn't know we should. My younger brother, Adam, barely looked away from his phone. He was sprawled on the floor, half wrapped in a blanket like some kind of lazy caterpillar. He only raised an eyebrow and mumbled something about how the Wi-Fi better not go out. He was the kind of kid who believed the world began and ended with his online games. Even the thought of a power cut was enough to ruin his entire night. Mom was in the kitchen, stirring a pot of something that smelled warm and familiar. The kind of food that felt like comfort without even touching it. She didn't notice the flicker at all. Or maybe she did but simply didn't care. She had lived through 100 blackouts in her life and didn't carry the kind of imagination that sees mystery in small things. Dad was on the couch reading, glasses low on his nose, half absorbed in some book he probably wouldn't remember after finishing. He paused, looked up at the ceiling light, then shrugged and returned to his page. That was it. No conversation about it. No lingering unease. Just a normal family, in a normal house, on a normal night. And then the lights flickered again. This time, it wasn't a quick dip. It was a slow, dragging pulse. The bulbs dimmed until the room was washed in a kind of fading yellow, the shadows on the walls stretching a little too far, like they were reaching out. A soft buzzing noise followed, low and oddly warm, like the house itself was humming under its breath. Even then, it didn't seem terrifying, just strange. Strange enough that Adam finally looked up for longer than a second. "What was that?" he asked, pulling the blanket up to his chin. His voice sounded small, not scared, just unsettled. Like his brain was trying to label a sound it had never heard before. Dad set his book down this time. "Probably the transformer again," he said. But his tone didn't have the same casualness as before. He stood, walked toward the light switch, flicked it off, and then on again. The bulbs responded normally at first. Then, just as we thought everything was fine, they flickered a third time, hard enough to make the room blink completely dark before bursting back to life. Mom finally stepped out of the kitchen. "That's not normal," she said. She wiped her hands on her apron and glanced around, as if expecting to find some logical explanation hiding in a corner. Before anyone could respond, the house grew quiet in a way that didn't feel natural. The kind of quiet you notice only because the background noise disappears all at once. The refrigerator clicked off. The heater went silent. Even the faint noise of wind outside seemed to fade. It was like the entire world paused. And then the power went out. The house plunged into complete darkness, not the soft, gray kind you get when moonlight slips through windows, but thick, heavy darkness that felt almost too solid. I could hear Adam's breathing shift. I could hear Mom mutter something under her breath. And over all of that, I heard something else, a soft, slow creaking. The sound of wood bending, like a door gently easing open somewhere in the house. Dad pulled out his phone and switched on the flashlight. The narrow beam cut through the darkness, shaky and uncertain, landing on our faces first before scanning the room. Adam scooted closer to me, gripping my arm. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. Dad tried to calm him. "It's the house settling. Happens when the power cuts suddenly." But even he didn't sound convinced. The creaking noise came again. Only this time, it wasn't distant. It wasn't subtle. It was clear, deliberate, and much closer, just down the hallway. We all turned toward the sound at the same moment. That hallway had always looked long at night, but with only the phone's small beam of light, it seemed endless. A tunnel of darkness, swallowing everything past the first few feet. The air felt different now, thicker, like it carried a faint chill. Not a breeze, not a draft. More like the cold that comes from a place where warmth simply does not exist. Mom whispered, maybe a window blew open. She said it softly, as if saying it louder might make whatever caused the sound react. But all the windows had been locked. Dad checked them before dinner. He always did. Then came the sound that froze all of us where we stood. Slow footsteps. Not heavy ones. Not aggressive ones. Just slow. Careful. As if something or someone was trying not to be heard, but was too unfamiliar with the house to move silently. I felt my chest tighten. For a second, it didn't even feel real. Footsteps inside your own home are not something your brain wants to accept, especially when everyone who should be inside is already in the room with you. Dad raised his phone higher, aiming the beam toward the hallway. "Who's there?" he called out. No answer. The footsteps stopped. A new sound followed, soft breathing. Faint, but unmistakably close. Too close. Adam grabbed my sleeve so tight it almost hurt. I didn't push him away. I was frozen too. Dad took one step forward, and that was when the lights flickered back on. But not normally. They blinked in a rapid, jittery way, like they were struggling to stay alive, flashing so fast it almost created an illusion of movement in the hallway. Shadows danced against the walls, long and stretched and twisted, overlapping in strange shapes. I couldn't tell which shadows were ours and which weren't. The breathing stopped. For a brief second, I thought maybe everything was fine. Maybe the footsteps had been in our heads. Maybe it really was just the house reacting to the power outage. But then something shifted at the end of the hallway. I didn't see it clearly. Just a shape. A form. Something that didn't belong. The kind of presence you don't have to see directly to feel. The kind that sends a quiet wave through your body, telling you something is standing where nothing should be standing. The lights dimmed again. Adam whispered, "Please tell me you see that." I wanted to tell him no. I wanted to tell him it was nothing. But I couldn't. Because even though the figure was barely visible, even though the lights were jittering and making everything look distorted, I knew I saw something too. Dad stepped in front of us, shielding us out of instinct. His voice was shaking now. "Stay behind me." The figure didn't move. It didn't approach. It didn't step back either. It just stood there, motionless, as if watching. Then the lights flashed one final time. Bright, dim, bright, dim, almost out. And in the brief seconds of that flickering chaos, the figure shifted slightly, not forward, not sideways, just enough to let us know it was not a shadow, not a trick of the light, not our imagination. Something had walked in. And the moment the lights finally went completely out again, leaving us wrapped in full, suffocating darkness, we heard it take one slow step toward us. Just one. But enough to confirm that whatever it was real. And it was getting closer. For a moment, none of us made a sound. It felt like even the air had frozen, waiting to see what would happen next. The darkness after the lights went out was so complete that it almost felt physical, like it wrapped around us and pressed against our skin. I could hear my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. Mom's breath was shaky. Adam's fingers were still clinging to my arm, tighter than before. And somewhere down the hallway, something shifted again, so softly that if the house hadn't been so silent, we might have missed it. Dad lifted his phone, but the flashlight didn't turn back on. The screen wouldn't even wake. He pressed the button harder, then tapped it twice. Nothing. A thin sigh of frustration left him, and he whispered, "Battery was full, this doesn't make sense." It didn't. But nothing about the night did so far. Mom tried her phone next, but when she pressed the screen, it stayed black. She pressed again, then harder, her movements growing quicker. "Mine too," she whispered. "It's dead." We all knew they were fine before the lights went out. Adam had been using his phone only minutes before. But when he pulled it out now, the device looked like a lifeless piece of plastic. "Mine's dead too," he said, and his voice cracked a little, like he didn't even believe the words coming out of his mouth. We stood there, blind in the dark, trying to make sense of something that refused to make sense. That slow creaking sound, like weight shifting on old floorboards, came again. This time, it was closer. Not at the end of the hallway anymore. Maybe halfway. Maybe less. My chest tightened, and I instinctively leaned back even though I couldn't see anything. My imagination tried to fill the blackness with shapes, with outlines, with the figure that had been there only seconds before the lights went out. Dad whispered, "We're moving to the living room corner. Slow. Stay close." We shuffled backward until our backs pressed against the wall beside the couch. The feeling of something solid behind us was strangely comforting, even though it didn't actually protect us from anything. Dad kept himself in front, shielding us even though he couldn't see a thing. The house suddenly felt unfamiliar, like we were standing inside a place we had lived in for years but didn't recognize anymore. Without light, every sound felt sharper, louder, more deliberate. The ticking of the clock on the wall sounded like someone lightly tapping on glass. The wind brushing against the outside of the house sounded like whispered movement. And underneath all of that, there was a faint hum, low, steady, almost like the buzzing we heard when the lights first flickered, but softer now. Softer, yet somehow heavier. Adam quietly whispered, "Why is it so cold?" And only then did I notice it too. The temperature had dropped. Not freezing, not dangerous, just unnaturally cool. Like the air in the hallway came from somewhere that sunlight never reached. Mom wrapped her arms around herself. It's probably the heater turning off. But the heater had been off before, and it had never felt like this. Dad cleared his throat softly. "Stay calm. We still don't know what we heard. Could be the house adjusting. Could be something outside." But the sound was inside. Adam whispered immediately, almost too quickly. None of us argued with him. We couldn't. Dad took a slow breath. "I'm going to take one step forward and see if." He never finished his sentence. Because the creaking happened again. Only this time, it wasn't from the hallway. It was right near the living room doorway. I didn't see anything, but I felt it. The same feeling I had when the lights flickered and the figure appeared at the end of the hall. That quiet pressure in the air. That sense that someone else was standing in the room with us, watching. It didn't make sense. We were standing together. All four of us. No one else was supposed to be there. Still, the presence didn't move. It didn't breathe loudly. It didn't make any sound that would help us understand what it was. It just lingered, like it wanted us to know it was there, but wasn't ready to reveal itself again. Dad whispered, barely above a breath, "We're going to the front door." Quietly. Mom touched his arm. "What if?" "Just stay behind me," he said gently. We started moving again, slow steps, hands searching the air to avoid bumping into furniture. I tried to remember the layout of the living room, how many steps until the coffee table, where the rug began, where the floor changed texture. But everything felt different in the dark, like the room had shifted while we weren't watching. The faint presence seemed to drift slightly to the side, as if letting us pass or circling us. I didn't know which made my skin crawl more. Adam whispered, "Don't leave me," and I assured him I wouldn't, even though my own voice trembled. Dad reached the front door, but when he twisted the knob, it didn't budge. He tried again, harder. The door didn't even rattle. It was stuck, like something held it in place from the other side. He didn't swear or panic. He just stopped moving, one hand still on the knob, the other gently tapping the wood, as if searching for some reasonable explanation. But deep down, I think all of us already knew there wasn't one. Mom whispered, "Maybe the lock jammed." Dad didn't answer. Because right then, the hum in the house grew louder. Not loud enough to hurt, but loud enough to vibrate through the floor faintly. Like something was powering up. Like the air itself was shifting around us. Adam gripped my sleeve again. "It's behind us," he said, voice barely audible. I didn't want to look, even though I couldn't see anything. It felt like if I turned around, the darkness would shape itself into whatever stood there. Something told me it was still watching us, still deciding something. The hum grew a little more, and suddenly, the living room window made a faint clicking sound. Then another. Then another. As if the glass was adjusting to pressure from outside, or something brushing against it. Dad whispered, "Everyone stay quiet." But the silence didn't help. The tension didn't ease. The sense that we were not alone didn't fade. Instead, another sound joined the hum. Soft, subtle, familiar. The refrigerator clicked on again, but the power was still out. The clock on the wall started ticking again, but we couldn't see the hands move. A faint glow, barely noticeable, seemed to pulse from somewhere down the hallway, the same hallway where the figure first appeared. Not bright enough to light anything. Just a dim, throbbing warmth in the darkness, like a heartbeat inside the house. Adam whispered, "What is that?" None of us answered. The hum, the ticking, the soft glow, they all seemed to come together, building slowly, like the house was trying to speak. Or breathe. Dad stepped back from the door. "We need to move to the kitchen. There's another exit." But the moment he said that, the glow flickered once, dimmed, then strengthened. And from a hallway, where the glow pulsed, came a single sound. Not a footstep. Not breathing. Just a gentle tap, like someone lightly knocking from inside the house. 3 slow knocks. Then silence. Mom reached for Dad's shoulder, her hand trembling. "What does it want?" she whispered. Dad didn't answer. He didn't move either. None of us did. Because in that thick silence after the knocks, we heard something else from the hallway. A faint, quiet shift. Like the figure took another step. Just one. But one was enough. Whatever had walked into our home wasn't finished yet. And it wasn't going anywhere. The silence after that single step was heavier than anything we had felt so far. It pressed into the room like a weight, making every breath feel louder, every heartbeat sharper. No one dared to move, not even Dad. It was as if the house itself was holding us still, waiting for whatever had entered our home to make the next move. The faint glow in the hallway pulsed one more time, soft and slow, like it was connected to something alive. And every time it brightened even a little, I felt a strange pull in my chest, an instinctive awareness that something was watching us from deep within the dark. Dad finally whispered, "We're going to the kitchen. Stay close." Slow steps. His voice was steady, but I could hear the tension underneath. He wasn't trying to be brave for himself. He was doing it for us. We began moving again, inch by inch. The floor felt colder beneath our feet now, almost like the warmth had drained out of the house. I could feel Adam trembling beside me. Mom kept one hand on his back, guiding him gently in the dark. And all the while, the hum in the air lingered, vibrating faintly like a distant engine. As we reached the edge of the kitchen doorway, something unexpected happened. A soft, warm light flickered on above the sink, the small nightlight Mom always kept plugged in. It shouldn't have worked without power. But there it was, glowing softly and casting a gentle halo across the counter. Not bright enough to see everything, but enough to make out shapes. But the moment the light appeared, the hum stopped. Completely. The hallway glow faded too, leaving only the tiny kitchen light glowing like a small, fragile promise of safety. Dad hesitated, then stepped into the kitchen first. Nothing moved inside. Nothing shifted in the shadows. The back door stood where it always was, a faint outline in the dim light. He walked toward it, checking the lock with quiet fingers. "It's unlocked," he whispered, "but it feels stuck. Something's holding it." Mom stepped closer. "Can we push it?" Dad shook his head. "Not without making noise." "What if noise doesn't matter anymore?" Adam said softly. He wasn't trying to be brave. It sounded like he had given up on pretending everything was normal. I wanted to tell him nothing bad would happen. I wanted to tell him we'd be fine. But the truth was I didn't know. And the more I thought about the flickering lights, the dead phones, the glowing hallway, and the footsteps that didn't belong to any of us, the more I realized we needed answers, as much as we needed a way out. Then something strange happened. The kitchen window fogged slightly, as if someone breathed on the outside of it. Not quickly. Not all at once. Slowly, like a slow, warm breath passing across cold glass. Dad saw it too. He stepped back from the door and moved toward the window, squinting into the dim glow. He whispered, "Someone's outside." But the fogging didn't stop. It spread in a pattern. Not random, not chaotic, more like a shape, a line, then another, almost like someone or something was drawing on the glass with invisible fingertips. Mom pulled Adam close. "Don't look." But he looked anyway, eyes wide and unblinking. "What is it?" I whispered. Dad didn't speak at first. He just stared. Then slowly he exhaled, and his voice came out unsteady. "It looks like a handprint." The stillness that followed was almost painful. A handprint from outside suggested someone was standing right next to the window in the dark. But the shape wasn't normal. The fingers were a little too long. The space between them a little too wide. Not scary, just wrong in a quiet way. Like it belonged to something familiar, but not quite human. The fogged handprint stayed there for a few seconds, then faded slowly until the glass was clear again. Dad turned back toward us. "We have to move. Hallway. Upstairs. We need to get higher ground until we know what's going on." As we turned away from the window, I heard something faint, a gentle tapping outside, almost as if someone brushed their fingers against the wall. Just one light tap. Nothing more. We hurried into the hallway again, but this time the glow didn't return. The hum didn't restart. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. I kept expecting the footsteps to start again, or the breathing, or the strange creaks. But nothing came. And somehow, the silence was worse. As we reached the base of the stairs, Dad stopped suddenly. "You smell that?" he asked. At first, I didn't. Then it came faintly, something like old metal or cold stone. A smell that didn't match our home at all. It wasn't strong or unpleasant, just unfamiliar. And in a strange way, it reminded me of the forgotten attic we rarely opened. The one filled with old holiday decorations and childhood boxes. Mom whispered, "Where is it coming from?" Dad pointed up. The stairs. The smell wasn't the only thing. A soft draft blew down from the second floor. Not warm, not cold, just a faint movement of air, like a window might be cracked open somewhere. But none of our upstairs windows were unlocked. We started climbing the stairs slowly. Every step felt louder than it should have been, even though the house was quiet. The wooden steps didn't creak normally. They groaned softly, almost like the sound wasn't coming from the wood itself, but from somewhere deeper. When we reached the top, Dad raised a hand to stop us. I almost bumped into Adam. The hallway upstairs was dim, illuminated only by a sliver of moonlight sneaking through the window in my parents' bedroom. The shadows stretched down the hall like long fingers. And in the middle of the hallway floor lay something small. A folded piece of paper. Dad stepped forward carefully, crouched down, and picked it up. His fingers shook slightly as he unfolded it. He read it slowly. Once. Twice. Then he swallowed hard. "What does it say?" Mom whispered. Dad glanced back at us, his expression tight. "It's blank. Nothing on it." But I didn't believe him. He folded the paper slowly and slipped it into his pocket, like he didn't want us to see it again. That bothered me more than the blank paper would have. Dad never kept secrets like that. Not in moments like this. Before anyone could say anything else, a new sound drifted from the far end of the hallway, the faintest rustling, like fabric brushing lightly against a wall. Soft and slow. Not threatening. Just there. We all turned toward the sound. But there was nothing to see. Dad motioned for us to stay together. We checked the rooms, one by one. The thought made my stomach twist. Each room was filled with shadows and corners and places something could hide. But staying in the hallway wasn't safer. We went into Adam's room first. Everything looked normal. His posters, his unmade bed, the clothes on his chair. But the window was unlocked. Not open, just unlocked. He whispered, "I locked it this morning. I swear." Mom's lips pressed together. "It's fine. We'll lock it again." In my room, the window was locked, but the curtain was drawn open, even though I always left it closed. The air felt colder there too, just slightly. like something had been standing near the window not long ago. In the hallway again, Dad finally opened the door to the guest room. Everything inside was pitch black. He stepped in first and froze. "What is it?" I whispered. He didn't answer for a second. Finally, he said softly, "The attic ladder is down." My heart dropped. "We never left the attic ladder down." Adam whispered, "Someone was up there?" Dad didn't respond, because from the darkness beyond the open attic door came a soft sound, like something shifting its weight. Not footsteps, not breathing, just the quiet movement of someone who had been waiting. And the tension in the house, the one that had been building since the lights flickered, wrapped around us even tighter. Whatever had walked into our home had been here longer than we thought, and it was still above us. Dad didn't move at first. He just stared up into the dark square of the attic opening. His breath held tight. The attic ladder hanging down like that didn't just feel wrong. It felt impossible. We only ever pulled it down once or twice a year, and even then, Dad never left it open. He was careful like that. Careful about doors, windows, locks, everything. So the idea that something else had opened it, climbed down, and then left it hanging there, it made the air feel heavier, thicker, almost like the house was breathing in slow, deep waves. Mom whispered, "Don't go up there." Her voice was quiet, but I could hear the fear she tried to hide. Dad didn't answer. He just took one slow step closer, like he was fighting against something inside him. The hallway light from the moon barely touched the edges of the attic ladder, making it look like it was floating in the air. Every shadow around it seemed darker than before, like the attic wasn't just a room anymore, but something deeper. Something watching. Adam held my arm and whispered, "Do you hear that?" At first I didn't. But then, faintly, there was a soft dragging sound above us. Slow, steady, almost like someone shifting across the attic floor. Not walking. More like sliding something heavy across the wood. Dad raised his hand, signaling us to stay back. We didn't argue. Even breathing felt too loud. The dragging sound stopped. Then came something even worse, a single, light tap from somewhere above. Just one. But it echoed through the ceiling like the start of something we weren't prepared for. Dad swallowed, then whispered, "Whatever's up there, it's not coming down. It's waiting." Mom stepped closer to him. Then we stay together. No one goes up. But Dad gently shook his head. "If we don't know what's up there, we can't stay in the hallway. We don't know what it wants, or how long it's been moving around. Something opened the attic. Something left signs downstairs. We have to see." I wanted to argue. I wanted to tell him nothing in this house was normal anymore. But I knew that arguing wouldn't help. Dad's voice wasn't firm because he was being stubborn. It was firm because he was scared, and he needed to understand what was happening before it grew even worse. He stepped onto the first rung of a ladder. The wood creaked softly under his weight. Mom held onto his shirt like she wanted to pull him back, but knew she couldn't. The moment Dad climbed one step higher, the attic above seemed to grow darker, like the shadows swallowed whatever light touched them. He paused and whispered, "If anything moves behind me, get downstairs immediately." But none of us knew if the downstairs was safer. Dad climbed slowly, the ladder groaning under each step. When he reached the top, he lifted his head into the attic opening. For a moment, all we could hear was his breathing, steady but tight. Then he whispered, "There's something on the floor." "What?" Mom whispered back. "A box open, and something next to it." Before he could describe it, something shifted again above him. A small, quick sound, like something moved just out of reach. Dad froze. "There's someone up here," he whispered, but the words sounded drained, like he regretted saying them out loud. Before he could climb higher, the attic floor made a sudden loud creak, deeper, heavier. Not like a settling house. Not like an object falling. It sounded like a step. A full, heavy step. Dad immediately pulled back from the opening, climbing down faster than he went up. But he wasn't panicked, just controlled, urgent. When his feet touched the hallway floor, the atmosphere around us changed again. The heavy feeling intensified. Even the air felt different, like something big had just shifted inside the walls. Then came the soft hum again, the same low vibration we heard when the lights first flickered. It rose slowly, like something waking up, filling the hallway with a faint pulse. Mom whispered, "It followed us." Dad didn't respond. He backed away from the attic, guiding us slowly. But when we reached the end of the hallway, something unexpected happened. The lights downstairs flickered once. Then again. A thin crack of warm light illuminated the bottom of the stairs, just for a second, then disappeared. It didn't brighten anything fully, just flashed like a signal, a warning. And then came a sound we hadn't heard before, a rhythmic tapping from upstairs. Soft at first, then growing into a pattern. Not random, not chaotic, almost intentional. Tap, pause, tap, tap, pause. Adam whispered, "It's calling us." Mom held him tighter, whispering, "Don't say that." But we all felt it. The tapping wasn't coming from the attic anymore. It was coming from the far end of the upstairs hallway, the opposite direction from where the attic ladder hung. Dad turned slowly toward the sound. The moonlight barely reached that part of the hall, leaving it in a deep shadow. A shadow that seemed thicker than darkness should ever be. I whispered, "Dad, I think there's someone standing there." I didn't know why I said it. I didn't actually see anything. But the air at that end of the hallway felt different, still, but charged, like the moment right before lightning. Dad took one step toward the darkness. The tapping stopped. The shadows shifted. Something moved. Not enough to see, but enough to feel in our bones. And the moment it moved, the hum downstairs grew louder, vibrating through the floorboards. The house seemed alive, reacting to whatever stood at the end of the hallway. Like the walls themselves were holding their breath. Dad reached a hand out behind him, signaling us to stay back. But none of us wanted him moving any closer to that darkness. He whispered, "Who's there?" Silence. Then a soft exhale. Not loud, not harsh, just a calm, slow release of breath, like someone standing in the shadows was letting us know they were listening. Mom whispered, "We have to go downstairs." Dad didn't argue this time. He nodded quickly, backing away from the shadowed end of the hall without turning his back on it. We followed him step by step, each foot hitting the floor as quietly as possible. When we reached the stairs, the tapping started again. But this time, it wasn't at the end of the hallway. It was on the wall, right beside us. 3 soft knocks. Then the hum suddenly cut off. The hallway light, moonlight, darkened, as if something passed in front of the window downstairs, blocking the light for a moment. Everything went still, completely still. Dad whispered, "Run." We didn't need to think. We didn't need to look. We just ran, stumbling down the stairs in the dark, gripping the handrail, trying not to fall. But the moment our feet hit the first floor, a new sound came from the second floor. A heavy, deliberate step. Then another, slow, coming toward the stairs. And the faint glow from the hallway upstairs, just for a second, returned. But this time it wasn't soft. It pulsed brightly, almost like an eye opening, watching us, waiting. And whatever was upstairs was finally coming down. The silence that followed felt heavier than before, like the air itself had thickened. Maya didn't say anything at first. She just stared at the dark hallway, her breathing uneven, her hands trembling slightly at her sides. Ethan stepped forward, as if trying to shield her from whatever she thought she saw, but even he couldn't hide the worry creeping into his face. The house no longer felt like a place people lived in. It felt like someone else had already claimed it. The basement door stayed cracked open, not moving, not creaking, not shifting with the draft. That stillness made it more unsettling. If something had actually gone down there, shouldn't they have heard another step? Another breath? Something? But nothing came. And that nothing felt louder than noise. Maya finally whispered, "Ethan, that wasn't just the lights." He didn't answer right away. He kept staring into the hallway, squinting like he was trying to convince himself there was a logical explanation buried in the shapes of the shadows. But the shadows didn't help. They just made everything look like it was waiting. "I know," he said finally, quietly. "I know." They both stood there for a moment, trying to get their senses under control. Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone again, checking the battery, checking the flashlight, checking anything that made him feel like he had some control. The screen was still glitching at the edges, faint static crawling over the numbers like frost. He tapped it twice, but the flicker didn't go away. Maya swallowed hard. Maybe we should. She didn't finish. A soft sound floated down the hallway. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Something else. Something like old fabric brushing against a wall. Light. Slow. Just barely there. Ethan felt every muscle in his body tighten, and Maya's hand instinctively reached for his arm. "It's still in the house," she whispered. Ethan didn't tell her she was imagining things. He couldn't, because this time he heard it too. But then the sound faded again, disappearing into the deeper parts of the house. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It felt packed, like something was hiding behind it. Watching them. Waiting. Ethan took a breath and forced himself to speak steadily. "We need to understand what's happening. We can't just run. If we do, we'll never know what this thing wants." Maya shook her head. "I don't care what it wants." "But we heard the lights flicker again," he said. "Just like last night. Just like before everything started. And it's always the same moment, right before something shows up. There's something connecting all of this." Maya didn't argue. She was scared, but she wasn't blind. She knew something strange was happening. Something that didn't follow normal rules. "What if it's not just this house?" she said quietly. "What if it's following us?" The idea hung in the air like a cold breath. Ethan didn't dismiss it immediately, which made it worse. He thought about the flickering streetlights on their walk home. The low humming they'd both heard outside the grocery store. The strange static that kept crawling into their calls lately. The way his battery drained whenever they talked about that night. He finally whispered, "Maybe it is." Before Maya could respond, a sudden metallic clang echoed downstairs. Sharp, quick, not heavy, but deliberate. It sounded like something brushing against a pipe or knocking into a loose tool. Ethan and Maya both froze. The sound didn't repeat. It just lingered in their minds like a warning. She gripped his arm tighter. "Ethan, we shouldn't go down there." He knew she was right. But he also knew they couldn't keep ignoring something that kept pushing itself into their lives. He looked toward the basement door, now barely cracked open like an invitation, or a trap. "We don't go down," he said. "We just look. From here." He stepped closer to the door, moving slowly, making sure not to make any sudden noise. Maya followed him, though every instinct in her face said she didn't want to. Ethan leaned slightly forward and pushed the basement door open a little more with his fingertips. Cold air rushed up from below, chilling their skin instantly. It wasn't the normal coolness of a basement. It felt like air that hadn't been breathed in years, stale and heavy. The stairs disappeared into pure darkness. The light switch on the wall flickered, struggling for a moment before dimming out completely. The bulb didn't pop or spark. It just died like something drained it. Ethan's phone light flickered too, dimming, brightening, dimming again. "Ethan," Maya whispered urgently, "stop. This thing, whatever it is, it reacts to light. Or electricity. Or..." She didn't know the right word, and Ethan didn't either. But she was right. The timing wasn't random. It was too precise. Too targeted. He stepped back from the door, his heartbeat loud in his ears. And then, from the bottom of the stairs, they heard a sound that made their skin crawl. Not footsteps. Not breathing. Not movement. A single, slow exhale. Like something had been waiting for them to come closer. Maya grabbed Ethan's arm again, but before either of them could run, the exhale shifted. It wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. But there was something almost curious in it. Like whatever was down there wasn't hunting them. It was studying them. Ethan stumbled back, nearly tripping over the rug as he dragged Maya with him. The basement door, still halfway open, stayed still. No slam. No sudden shaking. No burst of movement. It was as if the thing down there didn't need to chase them. It knew they weren't going far. Maya's breath shook. "Ethan, what does it want?" He couldn't answer. But his mind kept circling something Maya had said earlier. What if it's following us? What if tonight wasn't about the basement? What if the basement was just where it first entered? Before he could gather his thoughts, a sudden vibration buzzed in his pocket. His phone. He didn't pull it out. He just stared at the fabric of his jeans as the buzzing continued. Maya whispered, "Don't answer it." "I'm not planning to," he said. But the buzzing didn't stop. It kept going, longer than any normal call. Finally, Ethan pulled the phone out, holding it so they both could see. The screen was cracked with static again, glitching. The call wasn't from a number. It wasn't from a contact. There was no name at all, just a blank space. And the timer counting up, as if someone or something was already on the line. Maya's voice barely came out. "Ethan had called you." He didn't move. He didn't speak. He just watched the timer climb. 10 seconds, 11, 12. Then, from the phone speaker, with a low static edge, came a sound neither of them were prepared for. A slow inhale. The same one from the basement. Ethan dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a soft thud, screen facing up, timer still climbing. The inhale continued, steady, calm, patient. Maya stepped back, shaking her head. And then, from the basement door, something began climbing the stairs. Not fast, not slow, just steady. Like it already knew they would wait. And like it already knew exactly what they'd do next. The last step echoed softly. And then the sound stopped. But nothing appeared in the doorway. Something was there. Something close. Something they couldn't see yet. And the house felt smaller than it ever had before. Ethan didn't dare breathe. His eyes stayed locked on the doorway, waiting for a shape to appear, an arm, a foot, a shadow, anything. But the opening remained empty, even though he could feel something standing just beyond it. Maya pressed herself closer to him, her grip tight, her heartbeat shaking through her hand. For a moment, neither of them moved. They were caught between the fear of staying still and the fear of running. But then the faintest shift in the air brushed across Ethan's face, like someone was crossing the threshold without making a sound. He stepped back, his heel hitting the edge of the couch, almost making him fall. Maya whispered, "Ethan, I can't take this anymore. We have to end this. Whatever it is, whatever it wants, we have to stop hiding." He looked at her, surprised. She didn't seem brave, she looked terrified. But something had changed in her expression. It was as if the fear had pushed her past a breaking point. She was done letting the unknown corner them. Ethan nodded slowly. He wasn't sure what they could do, but standing here, waiting, wasn't helping. He glanced around the room, and his eyes landed on the old fuse box on the opposite wall. Something clicked in his mind. Every time the thing appeared or got close, the lights flickered. The electricity glitched. The phone distorted. It didn't just follow the darkness. It followed the power. He whispered, "Maya, the lights. The house. The power. Every time it shows up, something electrical reacts. That's the pattern." She swallowed hard. "So what do we do?" "We cut the power," he said. "If it's using electricity to move or appear or whatever it's doing, taking that away might trap it. Or weaken it. Or something." Maya stared at him, unsure. "And if turning the lights off makes it stronger?" He didn't answer. He couldn't know. But something told him the only way to end this was to take a risk. A real one. Ethan forced himself to step forward toward the fuse box. He reached out slowly, feeling the tension in the air grow heavier, like the house itself was holding its breath. Maya kept her eyes on the doorway, watching for movement, ready to warn him. Just as Ethan grabbed the main switch, the basement door creaked open another inch. Not much, but enough to show a deeper blackness behind it. Maya let out a sharp breath. "Do it," she whispered. Ethan pulled the switch down. The house went silent. No hum. No flicker. No buzzing. The darkness wasn't normal. It felt deep, heavy, like the walls had closed in. Even the air felt different, as if something living in it had been cut off. And then, footsteps. Real ones. Slow. Clear. And moving away. Ethan grabbed Maya's hand. "It's leaving the stairs." She squeezed back. Then maybe it worked. But they both knew it wasn't over. The footsteps didn't go down. They moved across the living room, each step measured, thoughtful, like someone exploring a place they'd never been in darkness. Ethan could feel it brushing past unseen, almost close enough to touch. He whispered, "It's not bound to the light anymore, it's lost." Maya didn't know if that was a good thing or a bad thing. The footsteps circled the room once, twice, then stopped directly in front of them. Maya trembled, her breath speeding up, but Ethan held still. If they moved fast or panicked, he feared it would react. Then something happened neither of them expected. A glow. Soft, warm, golden. It appeared in the center of the living room, rising like a faint light behind a curtain. It wasn't harsh. It wasn't flickering. It was calm, almost gentle. And as it brightened, the shape standing in front of them slowly came into view. But it wasn't a creature. It wasn't a shadow. It wasn't even fully human. It looked like a figure made of dim outlines, as if drawn from the faintest reflection of light. Not threatening, not reaching, just standing. Maya gasped. "It's not here to hurt us." Ethan didn't answer. He couldn't. He was overwhelmed by the sudden shift. The presence felt different now, still strange, still eerie, but not dangerous anymore. More like someone trying to speak through a broken radio. Then the figure lifted an arm and pointed toward the window. Ethan and Maya exchanged a look. Slowly, they turned toward the glass. Outside, the street lamp flickered once, then burst in a spark of bright light before going completely dark. The glow outside faded until the entire neighborhood was swallowed in shadow. Maya whispered, "What does that mean?" Ethan's voice was barely a breath. I think it wasn't warning us about itself." The figure lowered its arm. Then the glow around it shifted, almost pulsing. The faint outline trembled, as though it was struggling to hold its shape. It pointed again, this time at Ethan's phone lying on the floor. He stepped toward it slowly, never taking his eye off the figure. When he picked up the phone, the screen flashed with static, then cleared. A single message appeared. "No sender. No number. Don't let in." Ethan stared at the message, confusion flooding his mind. "Don't let what in?" The figure flickered sharply. The golden glow dimmed, then shifted into something cooler, almost like moonlight. Maya stepped back, her breath trembling. The figure wasn't pointing anymore. It was recoiling, as if something was coming. Ethan turned toward the front door on instinct. At first, he saw nothing. But then, through the small glass panel near the handle, he saw movement outside. A shape. Tall. Still. Waiting. Not the same presence. Not the same energy. This one felt colder, heavier, like the darkness outside had formed a body. Maya whispered, "Ethan, that's what it was warning us about." He didn't speak. The thing outside didn't knock. It didn't move closer. It didn't push the door. It just stood there, watching, waiting for the lights to return, waiting for the house to be vulnerable again. Behind them, the faint golden figure trembled, its glow shrinking as if the darkness outside was pulling its strength away. Ethan looked at Maya. She looked at him. And for the first time all night, there was clarity in their fear. The thing in the house wasn't the enemy. The thing outside was. The golden figure flickered one last time. Then, in a final burst of weak light, it extended a hand toward the basement, almost like showing them a place to hide, or a place where the darkness couldn't reach. Then it vanished. The house was silent. The shape outside took one small step closer to the door. Maya grabbed Ethan's wrist. "What do we do?" Ethan took a breath, feeling the weight of everything hit him at once. The messages, the footsteps, the warning. The darkness outside growing stronger by the second. He whispered, "We don't open the door." But as he said it, the doorknob clicked. Not a twist, just a tiny sound. A reminder. The real danger had just arrived. And it wasn't leaving anytime soon. The doorknob didn't turn a second time. It just sat there, frozen in place, like the thing outside was deciding whether it should try again or wait for a better moment. Ethan stared at it, holding Maya's hand so tight his fingers felt numb. The house was dark, silent, and full of that cold, heavy feeling that came whenever something unnatural lingered nearby. But this time, it wasn't the same fear as before. Something had changed. Something about the glowing figure's warning had shifted the way they understood what was happening. Maya whispered, "It can't get in not unless we open it." Ethan nodded slowly. The message said the same thing. Don't let it in. That must be the rule. It needs an opening. Then we don't give it one, she said, though her voice was shaking. We just wait. But waiting felt impossible. They didn't know how long the thing would stay outside. They didn't know if the golden figure would return or if it had already used all its strength to warn them. And they didn't know why any of this had started in the first place. Ethan forced his breath to slow. We should go downstairs. It pointed to the basement before it disappeared. Maybe we're safer there. Maya hesitated, but she nodded. They moved together, every step slow and cautious. Even in the darkness, Ethan could sense that whatever was outside wasn't trying to break in. It was listening, watching, waiting for even the smallest mistake. When they reached the basement door, Ethan pushed it open, expecting the same heavy cold air from before. But this time, the air felt calm. Still a little cool, but not threatening. The darkness wasn't thick or alive. It was just a basement. They stepped down carefully. With the power off, their only light came from Ethan's phone, which was now acting normal again, the static on. The steps creaked under their feet, but nothing else stirred. At the bottom, they found exactly what the golden figure had shown them earlier, a small, unused section of the basement, half hidden behind a wooden storage shelf. Maya ran her hand over the wall. Why here? Ethan lowered his phone, shining it along the wall and the floor. That's when he noticed it, faint burn marks, like lines of heat had crawled across the concrete once, a long time ago. But these marks weren't random. They formed an outline, almost like a circle or a barrier. This isn't new, Ethan said softly. Someone sealed something out before, or sealed something in. Maya knelt down and touched the edge of the marking. You think the glowing figure was what? Part of that? Maybe, Ethan said. Maybe it was the one trapped here, and we woke it up when the lights flickered the first time. Maya frowned. But if it was trapped, why help us? Ethan didn't answer immediately. He thought about the soft glow, the way the figure had pointed, the calmness in its presence. It didn't seem angry. It didn't seem lost. It seemed tired, like it had been waiting for someone to listen. Because, Ethan finally said, it didn't want the other thing getting to us. It knew what was coming. It was trying to warn us before it was too late. Maya exhaled slowly, her fear lessening a little as the pieces fell into place. So what now? We just stay here until morning. Ethan shook his head. I don't think morning matters. Whatever's outside, it doesn't follow the same rules as daylight. But we can't hide forever. We need to finish what the figure started. Seal the barrier again. Maya stared at him. How? The answer came to him, without explanation, almost like the golden figure had left the idea in his mind. Electricity, Ethan said. The barrier burned once. It must have needed power to form. That's why the figure reacted when the lights flickered. It needed current, energy. Maya blinked. But the whole house is off. We don't need the whole house. Ethan lifted his phone, tapping the battery icon. Just enough power in one place. Maya looked from the phone to the floor markings. Do you think it'll work? I think it's what it wanted us to do, he said. That's why it showed us this room. They worked quickly. Ethan placed his phone in the center of the markings and turned on every battery-draining feature he could, flashlight, hotspot, maximum brightness. The small device lit up the room, casting long shadows across the basement walls. Maya knelt beside him, pressing her hands to the concrete circle, as if helping focus the flow. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the air shifted. A faint hum vibrated through the floor, soft at first, then stronger. The markings began to glow not golden, but a pale white, like moonlight scattered across ice. Maya gasped. Ethan, it's working. The hum grew louder, surrounding them, filling the room in a wave of steady energy. The glow expanded, wrapping around the small circle, rising up the walls like a protective shield. Ethan stepped back, pulling Maya with him. The warmth wasn't frightening. It felt like safety. And then, upstairs, the doorknob rattled. Hard. Twice. 3 times. Maya held her breath. Ethan grabbed her hand. The barrier's glow grew brighter, surging outward in one final burst. And the rattling stopped. The house above fell silent again. Completely. Ethan waited, listening for footsteps, breathing, movement, anything. But there was nothing. The presence outside was gone. Not fading away. Not lurking in the shadows. Just gone. Maya let out a shaky breath. We did it. Ethan nodded slowly. Yeah, I think we did. They waited a few more minutes before climbing the stairs. When they reached the living room, everything felt normal again. The air was lighter. The heaviness had lifted. Even the shadows looked ordinary. The front door stood still, untouched. The world outside calm and silent. Ethan approached the door and looked through the glass panel. The street was empty. Quiet. Nothing stood waiting anymore. Maya stepped beside him. Do you think it'll come back? He shook his head. Not if the seal holds. And not if the golden figure was right. She leaned gently against him. What was it, Ethan? The good one, what was it? He thought for a moment before answering. Something that didn't belong here anymore, but didn't want anything bad reaching us. Maybe it got stuck between places, and the power flicker opened a way for it to warn us. Maybe it wasn't strong enough to stop the danger itself, but it could guide us, protect us, just long enough to finish what it couldn't. Maya nodded slowly, comforted by that idea. Do you think it's gone now? Ethan looked toward the basement. I think it's free now. And whatever's trying to get in, we stopped it. Maya let out a small breath of relief. Then it's over. Ethan wrapped his arm around her shoulders. Yeah, it's over. They stood there together, feeling the quiet settle around them. The night outside was still peaceful, almost normal again. The house didn't feel haunted or heavy or watched. It felt like a home. Finally, Maya whispered, Ethan, I'm glad we didn't run. He smiled softly. Me too. And as they turned away from the door, the last faint trace of golden light shimmered along the hallway, gentle, warm, like a soft farewell, before fading into the dark for good. The night the lights flickered had changed everything. But it had also reminded them of something simple and true. Not every shadow comes to harm you. Some come to warn you. And some come to make sure you survive the darkness.